to the Knicks. We never really spoke specifically on Finals MVP, which shout out to Jalen Brunson because he was the winner of that. So we're just going to get into it, Mase. From everything we've seen, right, does this make Jalen Brunson the league's best point guard right now?
Yeah, I mean that's common sense. That goes without saying. It doesn't matter what SGA did, his sneakers, the chrome heart on the bottom of those sneakers. SGA is right there, but with this performance that I seen in the closeout season, it just what have you done for me lately? You know where we're from New York. Everything can change. It could change tonight, you know what I'm saying? Not tomorrow, tonight it could change. The performance that Jalen Brunson gave in that closeout game, his resilience when they was bumping him off the picks, they was trying to throw him to the floor. One time they knocked him into the scoreboard. It's like you're not gonna rattle him, and he just comes from a basketball pedigree. Sometimes the dad wants you to do well, but the mother wants you to be a violinist. You know what I'm saying? But it seemed like his mother breeds basketball, his dad breeds basketball. He's just basketball through and through. He doesn't want to do anything else. He doesn't like anything. It looked like he doesn't like anything else. And it's going to be hard for a person that eats, sleep, and breathe basketball to not be the best player on the floor. So right now, I know before this playoffs, we had different people up there with him. He was right there with Cade. He was right there with SGA, but now he surpassed him with this performance. And you always got to say the best player is the one who got MVP. There's no way around that. How could I not be the best player? There's no way y'all have a conversation with me or Killer about I'm not the best player and I'm standing here with the trophy. So whether Killer won the championship up in Rucker at 15, if he's standing there with the MVP, he's the best player in there. I don't want to hear how old everybody is and what you did before. We're going with right now. Right now, Jalen Brunson is the best player in the league.
I seen niggas get the MVP. It wasn't the best player. Andre Iguodala got an MVP one year because he got it. LeBron James good. So they was like, give it to Iguodala. He's pretty good on defense. So it's scenarios. But listen, I gotta agree with Mase. It's hard to argue. If you're sitting there saying, if you start on the team, right, you say you want a point guard, how you don't say you don't want Jalen Brunson? And like I said, everybody who dissed Jalen Brunson is kicking themselves in the ass because Jalen Brunson, and the reason I love the nigga Jalen Brunson is because he didn't say nothing. Everybody talk shit. Even even me and Mase, to be totally honest with you. But you're gonna see what he can do against Harden and Donovan Mitchell. Is different when it's sport. And then you see all these sound bites of all these other sports analysts when Jalen Brunson got to the Knicks. Oh, he's too small. Becky Hammond, the coach. Oh, I don't know. She told Big Perk on ESPN, nah, he can't get it done. You need a 1A player. You don't have a 1A player on the Knicks. And then Perk was like, yo, they got a 1A player. But I ain't gonna lie, Kendrick Perkins been pumping Jalen Brunson pause for the last year and a half. And he's the only one I've seen very consistent saying that he can win a championship. He says only been gonna be 3 people, small guards to win championships. It would be Jalen Brunson, Isaiah Thomas, and Steph Curry. I don't even put Steph Curry in that equation. First of all, Steph Curry's 6'3". Even though he's a smaller guard. Jalen Brunson 6'2", Isaiah Thomas 6'1". But Steph Curry's not even a traditional point guard. He doesn't even bring the ball up. He plays off the ball a lot. So it's really just Jalen Brunson and Isaiah Thomas.
Why not Kyrie?
We're talking about 1 championships.
Kyrie.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that, yeah. That's a good point, too. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But I think that what Kendrick Perkins was trying to say, the best player, and that's arguable, too, if you want to pick him over LeBron.
Because Kyrie hit the shot to win it.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
We got to put Kyrie there. Kyrie hit that 3
that's a great point.
Ahead 3 to win it.
That's a good point as well, absolutely. But I guess that's the argument. But yeah, I didn't even think about great assessment as well. That's why I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, I forgot the nigga actually won with LeBron. So absolutely, that's a great point, Mase. So yeah, you got Kyrie, you got Isaiah Thomas, and now you got Jalen Brunson. But I gotta agree with it right now. I'm not taking a point guard over Jalen Brunson. This is what I'm saying. This is exactly why I wanted to have Jalen Brunson go against SGA. So this wouldn't even be a conversation. Because at the end of the day, you can't get, I'm not mad at somebody gonna say SGA neither. Listen, I said SGA too, and I might tomorrow say SGA. You know, we in the moment right now for 45-point victory in the closeout.
Crazy.
It may be 3 weeks and I'll be like, nah, I'm bugging, 6'7". Nigga smooth as ice. Didn't have no help really. Chet checked out. Chet checked out before the fucking series started with motherfucking San Antonio. AJ Mitchell, he was hurt, which is their second lead scorer. We talk about J-Dub, took them niggas to 7 games basically by himself. You know, so what help did he really have? Dork is just there for defense. He be football player and shit. Shout out to Dork. I think he's a great player as well. But they did a lot. Fingernail Man did something one game with them niggas. What's the nigga name? Yeah, you know that nigga name by heart.
It's like, yo.
Yeah, he played a couple good games, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, that's why I really want to see that that Oklahoma City SGA against the Knicks, because it wouldn't have been no argument after. It wouldn't have even been. Oh yeah. It wouldn't have been nothing because, like I said,
right now we still want to see it.
Yeah, because
we want to definitely see it now.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's hard to argue. We 48 hours away from a 45-point victory.
Yeah.
But I don't know next month. Next month I'll be like, nah, niggas is wild. SGA is nice. So them two players would have played against each other, that would have been sensational because it wouldn't have been an argument. You would have seen.
There comes a point in professional sports when all the outside noise suddenly fades away, and the arguments, doubts, comparisons to bigger stars, and louder resumes lose their power against what is unfolding right in front of you. That moment arrived for Jalen Brunson in a closeout game that did far more than finish a series. It shut down an entire debate. And after listening to the podcast host spend 6 minutes breaking it down, it becomes clear they weren't really discussing ordinary statistics or box score numbers. They were talking about something much more significant, the precise moment an overlooked player crosses the line from underrated to impossible to deny. So let's begin with the question sitting at the center of this entire conversation, because it's a massive one. Is Jalen Brunson, right now, the best point guard in the entire NBA? Not one of the top 3, not top 5, but number 1. And what's striking is how quickly that question receives an answer. There is no hesitation, no drawn-out debate, and no attempt to qualify it. The answer is simple. It's common sense. That's the kind of confidence you only hear after a performance so dominant and complete that competing arguments suddenly feel irrelevant. It doesn't matter what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander accomplished this season. It doesn't matter that SGA is the reigning MVP, that his game looks effortless and surgical, or that even his signature shoes have become part of the larger NBA conversation. None of that changes what happened during a closeout game when one player essentially carried his franchise and refused to let the moment slip away. And this is exactly where the conversation becomes interesting. The phrase, "What have you done for me lately?" isn't merely a catchy saying. It's an entire philosophy. It's the mindset of a city and fan base that cares less about reputation, preseason rankings, or storylines created months earlier. New York basketball operates on a different timeline. What happens tonight carries more weight than what happened last year. What happens in this series can matter more than an MVP vote from the previous season. And once you look at the game through that lens, the hierarchy can flip almost instantly. Not slowly, not after an entire career, but right there in real time, during the fourth quarter of a game determining who gets to keep playing basketball into June. So what exactly happened during that closeout game? The answer is almost brutal to visualize. Brunson wasn't simply knocking down shots efficiently or calmly directing the offense. He was taking a physical beating. Defenders were crashing into him around screens, bumping him, disrupting his balance, and clearly trying to make him understand that the physical pressure wasn't going away. At one point, Brunson was knocked directly into the scoreboard. Think about that for a second. during a playoff closeout game, a player absorbed enough contact to collide with the equipment surrounding the court, and somehow the game still kept moving in the direction he wanted. That's more than basketball ability. That's a form of toughness you can't simply install through coaching, manufacture in a gym, or reproduce by watching endless film and taking extra shots. That's temperament. That's refusing to lose your composure regardless of how many bodies are coming at you. And according to the hosts, that kind of toughness didn't appear out of thin air. It was built through pedigree, through an upbringing inside basketball that very few players experience. There's an important point here about how families can shape an athlete's entire future. Sometimes a father dreams of making his son an athlete, while the mother imagines a completely different path. Maybe she sees a musician. Maybe she wants pursuing something far removed from the physical demands and sacrifices of professional sports. But that wasn't Brunson's story. Based on this account, both sides of his upbringing were pushing toward the same destination. Basketball wasn't simply one interest among many, it became the interest, the obsession, the all-consuming pursuit. And when someone spends virtually an entire life eating, sleeping, and breathing one craft, without competing passions pulling them in another direction, the logic suggests a powerful result. Eventually, becoming exceptional starts to feel almost inevitable, because while others are dividing their attention, he's giving everything to one thing. Now this is where the discussion takes an even more fascinating turn, because it's no longer simply about judging talent, it's about understanding how legacies can change while we're watching them happen. Before this playoff run, Brunson's name was often grouped with other point guards, such as Cade Cunningham and SGA, in the larger debate over who could become the next generation's elite floor general. He was absolutely part of the conversation. He was a comparable name, someone you had to mention, but perhaps not always the first name you would choose. Then performance happened, and suddenly the entire order began shifting. That's what elite performances can do. They can rewrite the hierarchy overnight. And the argument being presented here is almost aggressively straightforward, yet difficult to dismiss. The best player is the one with the hardware to back up the claim. Not potential, not projections, not promises about what might happen someday. Eventually doesn't count. The trophy sitting in your hands becomes the evidence, because how can someone confidently argue against you while you're the one standing there holding the championship prize? The hosts take that idea even further with a personal and almost confrontational example. Imagine a 15-year-old street ball phenom winning a championship at Rucker Park while also taking home the MVP trophy. People can debate his age, his experience, or how limited his resume might be, but in that exact setting, at that exact moment, with that trophy in his hands, the argument says he's the best player there. It's a right-now mentality. It refuses to allow history or reputation to overpower what reality is showing you today. And right now, at this exact point in time, Jalen Brunson is being placed at the top of the point guard conversation, not because he has accumulated a decade of legendary achievements, but because of what he just managed to accomplish while under immense pressure on basketball's biggest stage. But then, the conversation does something important. It challenges its own certainty and introduces a little self-awareness. Because winning an MVP or another major individual award doesn't automatically prove that you are objectively the best player. Awards are decided by people, and people can be influenced by narratives, matchups, media storylines, and moments that don't always capture the complete on-court picture. The example they bring up makes that point sharply. A defensive specialist once won Finals MVP in large part because of the way he defended LeBron James, not necessarily because he was the most complete or statistically dominant player on the floor, but because the defensive matchup created a compelling story that voters rewarded. That's a crucial reminder that trophies can sometimes create a slightly misleading picture. Still, even after acknowledging that limitation, the hosts arrive at the same conclusion. If you were starting a franchise from zero today and someone told you to choose one point guard, could you honestly make a stronger case for somebody other than Jalen Brunson right now? That qualification doesn't destroy the argument. If anything, it makes the argument more credible. And this is where the discussion gets even more compelling, because personal accountability finally enters the picture. The hosts openly admit that they underestimated Brunson. When the Knicks were being discussed against elite opponents, including players like James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, there were serious questions about whether Brunson could truly deliver at that level. It's easy to dominate weaker competition. It's a completely different challenge when elite stars are standing across from you and the expectation is to survive, respond, and win. And the hosts make it clear that their skepticism wasn't some isolated opinion, it was everywhere. National media figures repeatedly questioned whether Brunson's size would prevent him from becoming a legitimate #1 option on a championship-caliber team. There's a specific memory brought back during this discussion that suddenly looks a lot different in hindsight. A former coach turned television analyst once said bluntly that the Knicks simply didn't have a true 1A player, essentially arguing that Brunson wasn't capable of being the unquestioned centerpiece of a team strong enough to win a championship. And the response from another analyst at the time was remarkably straightforward, yet now sounds almost prophetic. Yes, they absolutely had a 1A player. They had them all along. The problem was that people simply weren't ready to recognize it. From there, the conversation makes an important point about giving credit where credit belongs. One analyst gets specifically praised for backing Brunson consistently for more than a year, long before this playoff run finally gave that belief undeniable evidence. And that distinction matters in sports media. Anybody can climb aboard after the championship is secured. It takes real conviction to make the argument when nothing has been proven yet, and the skepticism is still louder than the support. That same analyst also appears to have developed a very specific historical standard for judging smaller guards and their ability to become championship driving forces. The argument is that throughout NBA history, only a select group of undersized guards have managed to win championships while genuinely being among the primary engines of those teams. Isaiah Thomas, and now, in this new context, Jalen Brunson. But then comes a fascinating question about whether Steph Curry should actually be included in that same category. And this isn't some lazy talking point either. It's a legitimate basketball debate. The reasoning for separating Curry from the traditional undersized point guard conversation isn't really based on his height. It's based on what he's asked to do. Steph Curry may not be a particularly large guard by NBA standards, but he doesn't operate exactly like a traditional ball-dominant point guard in the way Brunson or Isaiah Thomas did. Curry spends enormous portions of games operating away from the basketball, flying around screens, and creating advantages through constant movement instead of bringing the ball up and initiating every possession himself. So yes, Curry is physically undersized, but his responsibilities aren't identical to those carried by a conventional lead guard. He's not always responsible for controlling every possession, absorbing relentless ball pressure, and making the critical decision on every trip down the floor. That distinction becomes important because it shifts the argument away from simple height comparisons and toward role, function, and responsibility. By this particular logic, Brunson and Isaiah Thomas are being asked to perform a fundamentally different job, and arguably a more demanding one in certain areas, even while Curry's overall impact, shooting range, and ability to warp a defense remain absolutely extraordinary. Then, almost casually, another name enters the conversation and forces an immediate correction: Kyrie Irving. There's a brief moment where his name is forgotten, followed by a quick realization, and honestly, that makes the exchange feel even more authentic, because Kyrie, despite having a smaller guard frame, hit one of the most legendary shots in finals history to secure a championship. That's not some minor detail that can simply be overlooked. That shot is permanently stamped into NBA history. And once Kyrie gets added back into the discussion, there really isn't a convincing argument for leaving him out of the lineage of undersized guards who personally changed the outcome of a championship with their own performance. So the group expands. Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving, and Jalen Brunson now sit within that conversation, while Steph Curry remains in a somewhat separate lane because of the unique way he functions offensively. What makes this exchange so compelling is that the real subject isn't box score production at all. It's about watching a legacy take shape in real time and having enough honesty to admit uncertainty while still taking a position. Because immediately after all the praise, all the validation, and all the talk about Brunson being the best point guard in basketball, the conversation takes another turn. There's an unusually honest, almost self-aware admission that this opinion may not hold forever. Give it 3 weeks and the entire tone could change. The confidence being expressed right now is heavily influenced by the fresh memory of Brunson delivering a 45-point closeout performance. That's not some completely detached evaluation constructed after months of calm, neutral analysis. It's a reaction still carrying the emotional force of a dominant, statement-making night. And strangely enough, admitting that actually makes the argument feel more believable rather than weaker. This isn't blind praise. It's an acknowledgement that sports opinions are often shaped by recency, emotion, momentum, and the electricity of watching something extraordinary unfold in front of you. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're honest about the influence. From there, the conversation moves into a piece of context that actually strengthens the argument instead of weakening it. Because being great when everything around you is perfect is one thing, but being great while circumstances are actively working against you is something else entirely. And the conditions surrounding this particular playoff run were anything but comfortable. One key teammate is specifically mentioned as becoming unavailable before a difficult series against San Antonio had even begun. That injury removed an important piece of the roster's depth, versatility, and two-way ability before the real pressure arrived. Then another rotation player enters the story, someone described as the team's second leading scorer, who suffered an injury of his own and forced the entire group to adjust its identity in the middle of the postseason without one of its biggest scoring weapons. And while all of that adversity was unfolding, another teammate received genuine praise for what he managed to accomplish. Largely through his own effort, he helped drag the team through a grueling 7-game series against a difficult opponent, relying on pure effort, relentless hustle, and a willingness to do whatever the moment demanded, possession after possession and game after game. There's also recognition for a big man whose biggest contributions come through defense, physicality, and the kind of work that rarely receives enough attention. He's described almost affectionately as having the mentality of a football player, the type of player willing to embrace the dirty work that may not dominate a box score, but absolutely influences winning. And even after that, another role player gets a shout-out for delivering one particularly memorable performance somewhere along the journey. His name is even slightly mangled during the conversation, which, oddly enough, makes the exchange feel more genuine rather than less. This isn't some perfectly rehearsed television segment where every detail has been polished beforehand. It's two people actually processing what they watched, occasionally forgetting a name, laughing at the mistake, and continuing because the larger point is far more important than perfect recall. And all of that context eventually leads straight back to the central argument. With important players compromised and the depth chart thinner than it needed to be entering a championship push, one player still found a way to become the best player on the floor when the stakes were at their absolute highest. That's a massive accomplishment. That's not what happens when a stacked roster simply makes life easy and carries its star toward comfortable production. That's what it looks like when a player takes an imperfect roster and elevates it through individual brilliance, relentless determination, and the mental toughness to keep delivering when everything around him starts breaking down. And then, right near the end of the discussion, a fascinating hypothetical completely changes the way the argument looks. What if the matchup everyone really wanted to see, Jalen Brunson's team against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's team, had actually happened in a genuine playoff series? The argument is that if those two teams had met, there probably wouldn't be much uncertainty left today. The debate wouldn't live in the realm of hypotheticals anymore. It would have been decided through results, direct competition, and the spectacle of two elite guards going possession for possession with everything at stake. Instead, we're left with two separate playoff journeys rather than a direct collision, meaning even the strongest argument being made right now remains partly interpretation instead of undeniable fact. And honestly, that's the emotional center of this entire conversation. This isn't some emotionless evaluation coming from a perfectly neutral studio where every variable has been calculated. It's a raw reaction from people who just witnessed something special and are still trying to understand exactly what it means while the adrenaline hasn't completely disappeared. There's something refreshing about admitting that the current belief that Jalen Brunson is the league's best point guard is still a moving target. It might survive another round of scrutiny, it might look different after enough time has passed and the emotional intensity has cooled down. But right now, only 48 hours removed from a dominant closeout performance that pushed a franchise forward despite injuries, adversity, and brutal physical treatment, the argument isn't necessarily about permanently ranking Brunson above every point guard in history. It's about recognizing a peak moment while you're actually watching it happen. It's about refusing to allow outdated preseason expectations or reputation-based rankings to overpower the evidence sitting directly in front of everyone. And that may be the strongest idea running through the entire conversation. At its core, this isn't a traditional stats versus stats or resume versus resume basketball argument. It's a philosophical question about how we should recognize greatness while it's unfolding. Are we supposed to wait years for enough evidence to accumulate before calling someone the best at their position? Or can we acknowledge an undeniable peak performance the moment it happens, even while accepting that our opinion could change later? The hosts clearly lean toward living in the present, trusting what they just witnessed, finally giving Brunson credit and refusing to let comfortable old narratives dictate what today's reality is telling them. And maybe that's exactly how Jalen Brunson's rise should be viewed. He wasn't handed some perfect path to stardom. He wasn't the biggest prospect, the most physically gifted athlete, or the player the media automatically selected before the season began. Everything he built came through relentless preparation, extraordinary mental toughness, and a refusal to allow outside criticism to determine what he believed he could become. Every collision around a screen, every defender trying to knock him off balance, every national question about whether his size would eventually become his limitation, all of it became motivation instead of a roadblock. And when the biggest moment of his career arrived, none of that resistance was enough to stop him. He absorbed the physical punishment, survived the skepticism, and produced a performance powerful enough to quiet, at least for the moment, one of the loudest debates surrounding the NBA today. Who is actually the best point guard in basketball right now? There's another important theme buried inside this conversation, and it involves the way basketball has always treated smaller players as if their size automatically limits their ceiling. Height becomes almost a shortcut for predicting dominance in this sport. Taller players are expected to offer more rim protection, greater defensive length, and physical advantages that should naturally translate into winning. And every undersized guard attempting to become the centerpiece of a championship team has had to challenge that assumption before proving anything on the court. Isaiah Thomas faced it. Kyrie Irving, despite all his individual brilliance, couldn't completely escape that conversation either. And Jalen Brunson has spent his entire career dealing with essentially the same question. Can a player below a certain physical threshold really be the unquestioned number one option, regardless of how skilled, mentally tough, or consistently impactful he becomes? What makes this particular moment different is that the skepticism wasn't some vague idea floating around basketball culture. It had an actual face and a specific quote attached to it. A respected voice in basketball media openly argued that this roster didn't possess a true 1A player, someone capable of becoming the unquestioned leader necessary to carry a championship run. That's not some quiet concern buried beneath the surface. That's a very public dismissal. And from a storytelling perspective, there's something incredibly satisfying about watching an athlete answer that kind of criticism without giving an interview, firing off a social media response, or holding a press conference. Brunson answered it on the court with a 45-point annihilation in a closeout game that left very little room for further argument. It's also worth looking closely at the relationship between the two hosts during this breakdown. Their movement from disagreement toward agreement reveals just how quickly perception can change when fresh evidence arrives. At one point, legitimate skepticism starts creeping back into the discussion. It's not blind negativity either. It's a reasonable acknowledgement that Brunson still hasn't been fully tested against certain elite names like Harden or Donovan Mitchell. Those players possess their own playoff experience, shot-making ability, and championship-level credentials, and none of that can simply be ignored because Brunson had one spectacular run. It's treated as a genuine, unanswered question, a variable that still needs to be tested. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the discussion from feeling fake or overly performative. There's still space for doubt, even while the confidence is growing. Great sports analysis doesn't manufacture certainty when the evidence isn't complete. It makes the strongest possible case from the information available while being honest about the questions that haven't been answered yet. Then the discussion reaches a layer that goes far beyond basketball itself. There's an emotional, almost spiritual element to what happens when someone spends years being doubted and then gets the opportunity to answer those doubts in real time on the biggest stage available. Because this isn't simply a story about a talented point guard executing an offensive system at a high level. It's a story about persistence against relentless and very public skepticism. Analysts questioned his size. Coaches turned commentators questioned whether he could lead. Rival fans and media personalities built entire narratives around the belief that this team, with this point guard at its center, simply didn't have enough to break through against elite competition. And every one of those narratives demanded an answer that couldn't come from an interview or a social media response. Argument. The answer had to be built through actual performances. It meant getting knocked into a scoreboard by defenders trying to physically disrupt him, then responding without losing control, without retaliating emotionally, and without allowing the chaos to dictate his game. Instead, he answered with the kind of poise and dominance that can turn a debate from temporary noise into something much closer to a definitive statement. And the earlier discussion about family and pedigree deserves another look because it adds another layer to Brunson's story. It suggests that what we're witnessing isn't some overnight transformation or sudden arrival, but the payoff of a life that has been relentlessly centered around mastering one pursuit. When a player's entire household is built around basketball from the earliest years, with no competing hobbies, divided attention, or alternative path quietly being pushed in the background, that athlete develops a completely different connection with the game than someone who discovers it later or has to balance it with other passions. It stops feeling like simply a profession and starts becoming part of who they are. And when that identity is formed so early and reinforced so completely, it can create the kind of competitor who refuses to panic under playoff pressure, doesn't fold when opponents try to impose their physicality, and sees adversity not as some impossible barrier, but as another repetition in a lifetime spent preparing for moments exactly like this. What this entire conversation ultimately reveals, beyond the specific argument over rankings and point guard status, is what sports fandom actually looks like when you're watching perceptions change in real time. Two people openly admitting that only months earlier they questioned whether this outcome was even possible, now sitting across from one another, convinced by what they've seen, while still leaving enough room to admit that their opinions could change again, depending on what comes next. That balance between strong conviction and genuine humility may be one of the most honest reflections of what it means to truly care about sports. Because nobody who watched that closeout game just 48 hours earlier has completely absorbed what its long-term historical significance might become. What they have absorbed is the immediate reality of watching a player get battered physically, refuse to collapse, and emerge from the chaos with a trophy and an argument that, at least right now, is incredibly difficult to dismiss. And maybe that's the biggest lesson to take from Brunson's closeout performance. It isn't necessarily a permanent ranking that should be carved into stone, but a reminder that the basketball landscape can change remarkably fast when one player produces a transcendent stretch at exactly the right time. Careers last for years, rankings constantly move, new challenges arrive every season, and the certainty everyone has today can easily become a footnote tomorrow. But every once in a while, a performance comes along so powerful that it forces everyone watching, from the media and opponents to even the most committed skeptics, to stop and reconsider what they thought they understood. That's exactly what happened here. This wasn't some slow, quiet climb up an imaginary rankings chart. It was a loud, physical, undeniable declaration delivered under playoff pressure in front of a city and fan base that had been waiting a long time to feel this confident about a player again. Whether that judgment still looks the same 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now, or at the end of Brunson's career is impossible to know. Sports opinions are constantly moving, shaped by recent performances, emotion, momentum, and the excitement of witnessing something extraordinary while it's still happening. But in this precise moment, with the dust still settling from a dominant closeout performance, the verdict being offered is clear, confident, and for now, extremely difficult to challenge. Jalen Brunson didn't simply close out a playoff series. He closed the book on an argument that had been building around him for years, and he settled it in the only language professional sports ultimately respects. Not through interviews, not through potential, not through promises about what he might become, but through actual performance. When the pressure reached its highest point and every eye was watching, he answered.